And enthusiasts are fighting a desperate duel against corrosion.
It's only glued on. I'm sure it'll be all right.
And the clock.
I'll be pretty gutted if we don't make it.
Their mission, to return historic military aircraft to the skies.
The hardest thing is finding the parts.
From Falklands vets to Cold War jets.
As a little lad, you go, Mum, can I have an Airfix kit? Now it's time to play, isn't it?
But it can be an unpredictable business.
We filled it up and all those seals decided to let go a bit.
We need a plan B. I'm not sure if we've got one.
And dangerous.
It can turn nasty quickly.
Contact. You're taking off thinking if the engine stops, where are you going to land? I mean, I've had 3 engine failures.
It takes serious money.
You need a cool £3 to £6 million to get a good spare part.
And total dedication.
Minus 28. Some of the tools are freezing up.
15 minutes of holding a screwdriver, you can't feel your fingers.
This time on Warbirds Workshop, weekend flyers fighting to return an unlikely warplane to the skies.
This is the underdog. It's the little plane that went to war.
But first, they must overcome rotten fabric and metal fatigue.
If they fail the inspection, they won't be going anywhere.
It's a race against the clock to make a risky flight.
Well, it'll either fly or it won't.
On the anniversary of D-Day.
We're not getting off this planet alive, whatever happens, are we? I could go down as a test pilot in history.
Across the flat farmland of Lincolnshire, the wartime runways that were home to the RAF's Lancaster bombers are now used by amateur pilots who fly for fun. Joanne, Paul, Ronnie and John are members of the Lincoln Aero Club.
We're a small club, 40 to 50 flying members, and it's basically recreational flying. Just let me get this chock. You okay, Ron?
Now the group are spending £15,000 of their own money totally rebuilding their veteran Piper Cub spotter plane and restoring her military markings.
You wouldn't know she was a military aircraft, really, but I don't think we realised quite what the old girl had been through until we started this project to recover the aircraft.
The group's Cub directed artillery fire in the deserts of Libya and the battlefields of Italy and France. 75 years on, her entire fabric skin needs replacing and her engine overhauling.
We've got the money in the group to refurbish, and the anniversary of Normandy coming up, and it all seemed to line up.
Now these 4 amateur pilots are teaming up with professional engineer Rob Stevens and his assistant Ken Reardon to rebuild their Warbird.
This group are quite a passionate bunch of guys. They're very keen.
Rob really knows his stuff about fabric aircraft, Cubs in particular, so he seemed the ideal choice.
The Cub will be recovered by fabric specialist Ken.
He's second to none, you know, he gets it spot on.
To save money, the group will do some work themselves.
But it's great to have them on board, and you can't deny their enthusiasm.
Ronnie's my wingman. We fly everywhere together.
Actually, it's converse is true. He's my wingman.
Jo, I know she's done some interesting flying. John is the guy that first taught me how to fly the Cub.
The team have a deadline to meet. They want to fly the Cub across the Channel to recreate her wartime exploits 75 years to the day after D-Day, the Allied invasion of Europe.
The whole process is enormous. You take what looks like an aircraft and destroy it. Here goes.
It's February 2019, and Rob has just 4 months to get the Cub back in the air. The aeroplane has already been dismantled. He'll start with the most fragile components. There's no guarantee she'll be fit to fly on.
Wings, they have a hard life, and they also stick out and hit things. So we generally start there because you're going to find something that's gone wrong. Yeah, they can be major problems. So there are 2 diagonal braces here that support the wingtip, and they should be straight, and they're not. They're curved. So it tells me that the wingtip bow, which is wood, has kind of shrunk in and compressed them. So we might have to straighten them. It's wood moving, shrinkage and movement over time.
Rob immediately begins to find what looks like evidence of the Cub's wartime past. Hurriedly done repairs to what could be battle damage.
There's quite a long repair here on this rib, and there's a couple of new bracing struts inside the rib.
The Cub must pass a strict airworthiness test. It's not uncommon for planes of this age to fail and be grounded forever.
We had one chap who came in for an annual, and a mouse had got in and eaten all these strings that we've been cutting. If we'd not spotted it, then the upper and lower surfaces on the wing could have come off, and then that fabric would have come off in the wind. So it would have been curtains.
Air-minded Americans of both sexes used to go skylarking in this pint-sized plane.
The Cub was designed for wealthy weekend flyers in the 1930s. It turned out to be ideal for directing artillery from the air.
But when Hitler's boys spot it, they start ducking. They know this small fry puddle jumper can direct a deadly barrage of artillery fire with pinpoint accuracy.
The US Army called them L-birds, or grasshoppers, and America built 20,000 of them.
The Germans gunning at them from the hills call it the Hellraiser.
Paul and his fellow owners have pieced together the story of the part their plane played in wartime history.
It took part in the North Africa campaign, and then it was shipped over to the Mediterranean towards Italy. And I've always understood that this one took part in the Monte Cassino raid.
30,000 soldiers are thought to have died in 5 months of bloody combat during the Battle of Monte Cassino. The Cub directed artillery fire onto a monastery where German paratroopers were dug in. She seems to have collected some battle damage.
One of these tubes here has been re-welded back together. Some of these longer tubes, if you have a careful look around them, you'll see where they've been welded back together.
The Cub's fuselage hasn't been stripped in 3 decades.
We were just joking that we might find some pre-war coinage in the bottom of the aircraft. It's just about stripping it off and discovering what condition the fuselage is in.
The planes were built in a hurry on a wartime production line. And it shows.
The aft section has been grafted on. So there's joints here and here, and there and there. It was just convenient to have somebody building rudder sections and somebody else building the forward section, and then the two were brought together. 90% or more. I mean, it's still original. So it's exactly as you'd expect to find it.
In less than 3 hours, the Cub's skeleton has been revealed, and Rob can assess her fitness to fly on.
There's bits of corrosion knocking around where paint's come off, but you'd expect that with the age of the aircraft. But it's in good nick overall.
But one vital part is definitely not in good nick.
All of the tail feathers have been bead blasted and stripped, but when we were doing that, we revealed a crack on the control horn. Somebody's randomly drilled some holes in a structural tube member, which isn't good.
Shocking. Was I really flying that?
Any one of those faults could have caused an unsurvivable crash. It's a chilling reminder that their lives depend on this work. The next phase of the rebuild centres on the Cub's temperamental ignition system.
Sometimes it doesn't want to switch off, and sometimes it don't want to switch on.
And Ken begins the critical job of hand-stitching the wings.
I was thinking, if you get this wrong, it falls out of the sky. I think you got to, really.
Three months to the D-Day deadline, and Piper Cub owners Paul, Ronnie and Joe have arrived to help with the next stage of their ambitious rebuild. Cleaning up its engine and restoring parts of its cockpit. Paul is focusing on the temperamental ignition system.
We're taking the magneto switch off. This is the bit that turns the mags on and puts the sparks to the engine, and it's been a bit troublesome of late.
The magneto creates a spark. The spark is passed through the lead to the plug, which ignites when the pot is at top dead center.
Sometimes it doesn't want to switch off, leaving us having to turn the fuel off and run the engine out of fuel, and sometimes it don't want to switch on. It's what makes it a plane and not a glider. I mean, I've been in this group over 30 years, I think, and it's always been there, so I would guess that is the original switch. And I'm going to have a word with Rob in a minute just to see what can and can't be done with it.
The restoration team are passionate about flying, and they know their aviation history.
This is Bomber County, obviously, Lincolnshire, nicknamed Bomber County because of the amount of airfields that took heavy bombers. When the guys were coming back from raids, all shot up. Once they got to the Lincolnshire County, they knew they were as safe as they could be. Whatever happened, there was an airfield within gliding range and they could get themselves on the floor.
Paul and Ronnie's Cub isn't the only war veteran flying around here.
Look out straight in front of us now. The two different triplane designs, the Sopwith being pursued by the Fokker.
You've flown one of these, haven't you?
I've had a few hours. I've never soloed, but I've had about 6 or 7 hours.
Tiger Moth?
Tiger Moth, yeah.
Yeah?
Nice aircraft.
Did you crash it?
No, never crashed. no, never crashed it.
Go on then, what's this one? I've been interested in war history ever since being a young lad. Reading comics and got the chance to have a go. There won't be many guys qualified to fly that or got any current time when they're looking for a pilot, will there?
Ronnie has memories of the war. He spent 15 years in the RAF.
I remember bombs dropping in Aberdeen, where I grew up. After that, I remember a Lancaster bomber flying overhead at about 50 or 60 feet up. Noisy thing that was.
I don't know what the casualty rates were, but I don't think I'd have fancied the odds too much. It'd been nice to live through it, but a lot didn't.
Back in Rob's hangar, the team are committed to retaining as many original parts as possible. This table would have been used by the Cub's observer, who'd be in radio contact with artillery on the ground.
He would have laid his maps out on here, and on his maps would have the grid positions. He'd observe from the ground what was going on and where the batteries and enemy artillery were, and then he'd relay that back to the base and direct the fire from there.
Some of these were shot down, but not many. And if somebody took a pop shot at one of these, within minutes, in would be coming 25-pound shells from the nearest battery. So they had to sit down there, quaking in the boots that we never spotted anything. You see from the airframe, bullets will go straight through this. And if a bullet goes through the engine and stops the engine, you just glide away as far as you can get.
The Cub was powered by a 65-horsepower engine, barely more powerful than some scooters today.
It's very like a Volkswagen, flat four, pretty standard altogether, really.
Ronnie has experienced the hair-raising problems of relying on 1940s technology to stay airborne.
The engine started to falter. I couldn't maintain height, and I couldn't get back to the runway, so I circled around, saw a big area of field nearby and touched down there. If a wing falls off, well, it's curtains, but with this one, if your engine stops for any reason, then you just glide and land. Because of the enormous wings, it makes a perfect glider.
Engineer Rob spends a lot of his time servicing more modern planes, brought in by customers from the farm strips of South Lincolnshire and North Norfolk.
Yeah, this is going to be an envelope for a wing.
But they also keep alive skills that date back to the days of the Wright brothers. The Cub's entire airframe is covered in fabric. Without it, it couldn't fly.
We're going to lay another sheet next to it and then stitch the two together. It's something that gets handed on. So I've been shown how to do this by people that have had it instilled in them. It's a bit of an art, and everybody's got a different way of doing it.
Rob and assistant Ken have just 2 months to complete the Cub's total rebuild. Paul has realised the challenge he and Ronnie face.
I'm not looking forward to crossing the channel, but it's probably more of a mental barrier than a physical one. I'd like to see some cloth go back on, and obviously I'd like to see it back in the green. Once it's in its military green, it'll start to look something.
But before the Cub flies again, thousands of stitches will have to be expertly inserted in her new fabric.
It's one of many small components that keeps an aeroplane together. And that's the thing, the strength of an aeroplane is not in the individual components, it's in the total assembly. The key is just everything working in harmony together to build you a strong structure.
But Rob is locked in a race against time.
We've got to try and get this ready in time for the Normandy celebrations in June, about 9 weeks. So there's a couple hundred hours in doing a pair of wings. There's 100 and something hours in covering a fuselage. So it all adds up. There's work to do, we know what needs doing, and it's just a case of cracking on.
In the spa town of Harrogate, Paul is back at work, drilling core samples on a building site. He's been flying for more than 20 years.
Much nicer up there than down here. When I'm not working on the plane, I try to run a business. When I was 24, I'd saved up enough for a brand new motorcycle. But just before I bought it, the biggest insurer in the country pulled out the market. So I took the £4.5 grand and got myself a pilot's licence instead. I can't wait to get it finished. Can't wait for the lads to get it done and get it test flown. That'll be an interesting morning when it's time to test fly it. You never really know. As long as the wings don't fall off, it'll be all right.
It's April, and with just 2 months to go to D-Day plus 75, Rob and his assistant Ken have been working overtime to recover the Cub. It's taken just 4 days to glue hundreds of pounds worth of fabric over her fuselage and wings. Ken must weave hundreds of meters of thread through hundreds of precisely punched holes.
It can take getting on for a day to mark it out and punch all the holes. I was thinking, you know, if you get this wrong, it falls out of the sky or something like that. I think you got to, really.
Ken is master of a craft that dates back to the First World War. Lives depend on every stitch.
Rib stitching holds the fabric onto the ribs because it can balloon once it's flying on the top surface because of the low pressure. Glue is designed for a shear force like that, but it's not very good when it comes to the peeling force. So if that's pulling up like that, it can be sort of peeling it off.
It's a process that relies on mastering the modified seine knot.
Pull it through. Across to like that, see it? And then you go under that bit. Under that bit. And then through the loop.
Once the stitching is completed, the seams will be covered by tape. Paint will then be thinly applied. The Cub weighs just 553 kilos fully laden, and half of that is the weight of the pilot, passenger, and petrol. Every ounce saved will improve the aircraft's performance.
This has had a first coat of dope on it, primer coat, so that makes it ring.
Completing the fabric will take another week at least. Waiting for Ken to finish his work, pilot Joanne is keeping busy with her other passion, riding vintage motorcycles.
They're both quite basic, mechanical engineering. They're very similar, obviously, in their design. The lightweight, both very exciting. The aircraft to fly and the bikes to ride about.
And she has the D-Day deadline on her mind.
Well, it's going to be amazing to get it across there. And with all the other L-birds that are going over as well, it's just going to be an amazing commemoration for the 75th anniversary.
In the hangar, painting the Cub is about to begin. The US Army only did 2 colours.
Drab olive and a light grey underneath, so it's standard camouflage colours using USA military paints colours.
But as the team begin the final days of the rebuild, they're about to discover a major problem that could ground the Cub.
If they fail the inspection, they won't be going anywhere.
We need a plan B. Not sure we've got one.
With just weeks to go, the D-Day trip is in jeopardy. It's May, and there's a crisis. With just 4 weeks to go, Rob has discovered the stainless steel fork ends that help hold on the wings may be defective.
If they fail the inspection, these are on 6-week lead time, so they won't be going anywhere for 6 weeks. So it's critical.
New ones aren't available anywhere in the UK.
I think there'll be a few upset members of the group. So we've got to get them off and find out if they're any cracks or whether they're good to go.
Doncaster Sheffield Airport in South Yorkshire. And Paul and Ronnie are on a mission that could save or sink the project.
They are a major structural component, and we just have to prove that they are serviceable.
Hello, it's Paul Goran here. We're here for the NDT testing on some units.
Yeah, okay, someone's coming down to you.
Thank you.
Following a fatal crash, aviation safety experts have insisted the fork ends are replaced after every 2,000 hours of flight. The trouble is, no one knows how many hours their Cub has flown.
If we had any paperwork, we've long since lost it. So we think these are about 25, 26 years old at least, and we've no idea how many hours they've done. So basically, they're scrap until we prove that they're serviceable.
The future of the D-Day mission hangs on the parts passing a microscopic examination by metallurgists.
We need a plan B. Not sure if we've got one. Morning.
Hello. How are you doing?
Yeah, fine.
What we'll probably do with these, Paul, is what we call a fluorescent penetrant inspection test.
Yeah.
So what we do there, we'll make sure that first of all there's no oil or grease on the surface of the component.
Yeah.
We'll then coat it with a chemical, which is a very low surface tension material.
Yeah.
And what it'll do is, if there's any defects on the surface, it'll find its way into the defects.
The vital fork ends are being stained with a dye that shows up invisible cracks. If any are found, the Normandy flight is off. Ultraviolet light should show up any cracks.
Yeah, there's a lot riding on this, I think.
Paul and Ronnie can only wait and worry.
Last time I was like this, someone came out and said it's a boy.
Well, gents, here we go.
Go on then, good or bad?
Good, 2 serviceable components.
Right, lovely. Marvellous. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Good luck.
I'm going to zoom these down to the aeroplane this afternoon. Hopefully by next week the wings will be on. By next Thursday, Friday, we'll be flying it with a bit of luck. Test flight.
We'll toss up for the test flight and the loser does it.
Loser goes.
After a 100-mile drive to Rob's hangar, the restoration team are hitting the home straight. The fork ends are being refitted to the Cub. The missing paperwork has been found, and the aeroplane is ready to be reassembled.
We're at that stage where, barring cock-ups and disasters, it should go on. Has to, because I want rid of it.
Today, the restoration team must reattach the newly painted wings, the supporting struts, and the control cables. It's a procedure where things can go badly wrong.
I suppose we could drop them. That would be a bad day. They're not heavy, but they're just awkward, and we're moving them around. One of us has got to run up a set of ladders and be able to hold the wing whilst we get the bolts in at the other end.
It's a critical stage. If one hole is out of alignment by a millimetre, they must start the process again.
Another 6 inches. They're tiny at this end, at the root end of the wing. And forward to the leading edge, please. There's 2 bolts at the that hold the wing onto the aeroplane. That's all. You know, it's quite scary for the uninitiated. Hey, we're in. Well done. We just need to get the 2 holes to line up with the frame so that we can slide the bolt through. Can we go? Oh, back.
At last, the Cub is nearing completion.
Bit more. Whoop. Right, we're in. I think all that's got left to do is to put the serial number on the rudder. That's the serial number of the aircraft from manufacture. So I think we're going to have to cut this stencil in half. It's not going to work otherwise. We keep thinking of she's back in one piece when she arrived in one piece, and we've just turned around. But no, she's now looking the way she must have done. It's quite special, isn't it? It's nice.
For the first time in over 70 years, the Cub is back in uniform. It's mid-May. She's almost ready to fly again. But not before her propeller has been bolted back in place.
So this is a very special propeller. Looks like they've had it painted and restored. Looks very clean. It is a beautiful thing, isn't it? They're laminated. So by that we mean there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 5 planks of wood laid on top of each other, all glued together. Well, it's moments like this when you get to the end of the project. It is good fun to see them go out looking like this. That's me just finding the set point on the torque. Virtually finger tight. I'd be happy to fly the channel in that. I'm quite happy. It's a very simple aeroplane and there's not many things that can go wrong.
Well,
so let's add.
Yeah.
We'll make that 15.
For Paul and Ronnie, the flight over the channel is now only 3 weeks away. It's time for a flight plan.
The main problem with the Cub, it's fairly slow at 70 knots, which is 70 nautical miles per hour. But if we've got any headwind, say a 10-knot headwind, that's going to take 10 knots per hour.
60 knots over the ground, which takes longer, obviously.
It's late May, and the group have arrived to see their new Warbird for the first time since Rob completed work.
Yeah, prop looks a bit shiny, but no doubt we'll get some wear on that.
And the Cub's new olive drab paint job is drawing admiring glances.
Oh, it's fantastic. They've done a cracking job on it, and it looks just a business.
Done a great job, without a doubt.
It'll look better with some oil on it. It's not a showpiece. There's a war on, you know.
They've decided to name their Cub Olive, after her distinctive green colour scheme. Many wartime grasshoppers were christened by their crews.
I came down here a couple of weeks ago when I first saw it in the olive drab, and ever since then I've been calling the plane Olive. So I drew a little cartoon of Olive and put a Tommy gun in her hand. So she's going to be called Olive for this trip at least anyway. If the other guys don't like it, they can remove it. But we need a lucky mascot for the French trip, so that's going to be it. Right, where we're looking on here then, we need to miss all these rivets and things.
Thereabouts, yeah.
About there? Or lower down?
In a few hours, the Cub will undergo her first test flight, but not before she's been officially weighed, a legal necessity for any aeroplane.
When we're loading this up to go to France, we'll calculate mine and Ronnie's weight, how much baggage we're putting in, whereabouts the baggage is going in relation to the balance of the aircraft. It keeps everything in the envelope, as you call it. There's an envelope where you're safe to fly within. If you stray out of the envelope, it affects the handling of the aircraft.
They all seem very pleased with it, which is gratifying after all the hours of hard work we've put in.
Keep it going, Ronnie. What, we're going just into wind, or?
Paul has volunteered to be test pilot, an amateur aviator about to take on one of the most dangerous jobs in flying.
Let's flight after a rebuild, so we're just going to do a quick walk round. We'll start off at the front. We're looking for all lock wire where it's supposed to be. Correct way around to stop the nuts from doing. Check the leading edges of the propeller. Rudder's connected. That's the big thing. Without a rudder, you ain't got a hope in hell in this old stuff. Well, it'll either fly or it won't, will it? We're not getting off this planet alive, whatever happens, are we? So I could go down as a test pilot in history. Now, I'll just turn it over, just to, because it hasn't had any oil around it for years, has it? Got one there that's not making compression.
There's a strong wind, and Cubs are notorious for being hard to fly in conditions like this.
Right, okay. Yeah, we're good to go. We've finally got it started. Feed the power in nice and steady. Bring up the tail. 30 knots. 35.
Paul's finding the Cub is trying to turn into the blustery wind.
500 feet, we're now legal, so that makes me happy. Still climbing, T's and P's are good.
But he must keep his mind on the basics.
No slop. Nicely weighted. Everything responds the same way. Around we go.
magnetos are once again proving a problem.
Here come the bumps. 50 knots we're looking for. 50 knots we've got. And that's not too bad at all. I've done a lot worse than that.
After just 15 minutes in the air, the Cub is heading back to the hangar. It's Paul's chance to download his thoughts to Rob.
Well, first off, it's not very pleasant up there at all.
No.
It's a seriously horrible day for flying through something like this.
Yeah.
They're getting bounced all around the sky. It feels completely different. Seems to want to roll very quickly, which you never used to do. It also used to take a bit of heaving over. So I thought I was going to do a gentle turn on climb out, and it turned out to be not a gentle turn, and then a big correction the other way. And then obviously we've got to work on this mag switch. For some reason we've got something wrong there. Doesn't inspire confidence when you've turned one of the mags off and nothing happens. Now I know what it's like to be a test pilot. I'll stick to drilling.
The team have only days to get to the bottom of the Cub's long-standing magneto problems. If they can't find the right answers, the D-Day flight is in jeopardy.
Oh, at the moment we've got a little bit of work to do, so you'd be crazy to set off until you know you've got your magnetos correct.
The group has work to do, and not long to finish it.
Plugs, harnesses,
The South Coast, June the 5th. And aeroplanes are gathering for a new, friendly invasion of France. Thanks to the discovery of a wiring problem in the magneto, the Cub is repaired and ready to join the Armada.
We got the aircraft back. We've done 3 or 4 hours in it to test fly it. It's all serviced, rebuilt, good to go.
That's 1780.
So, yeah, it's been 5 months in the making to this point.
Paul and Ronnie are joining a fleet of Cubs crossing the Channel to join the D-Day celebrations in Normandy. They'll be flying in loose formation with 2 other L4 Cubs.
This is a beautiful aeroplane.
It was only finished last week.
Was it?
Yeah, we've got to knock the shine off it. But it's flying well. I looked on the map. If we go over out of Dover Port and then stay west of Calais, it's literally 20 miles.
Yeah, shortest crossing is best. Yeah.
My man can't swim.
This won't be a comfortable flight. There's no life raft, and the forecast is uncertain.
We're not all that confident about the weather on the French coast, but we're keeping a close eye, so hopefully it'll work out all right. We have life jackets, which we'll put on, obviously, and a personal locator beacon, which always comes in handy. And the rest is up to fate, really. Up to the gods.
The aircraft doesn't know it's flying over water. It's the pilots that worry, not the aeroplane. If all else fails, I'll use Ronnie as a flotation device and paddle him back to dry land. Like that, isn't it, Ronnie?
Yeah.
Cubs from all over the UK are joining the Armada heading for France, flying in the slipstream of the pilots who spearheaded the invasion.
It feels a very special occasion for us. I think we're going to be making some memories this weekend, yeah, absolutely.
It's time for takeoff. The Cub is heading off on an ambitious flight across some of the world's busiest sea lanes. Paul and Ronnie's survival relies on a 65 horsepower engine designed almost 90 years ago.
I try not to think about it really and just concentrate on the task in hand. It's nowhere near as heroic as what they were doing back then, and nobody's shooting at us either, so not really the same thing in my book, but still pretty daunting nonetheless. We'll get a bit of an idea of what some of these guys went through.
Wow, this is awesome, Ron.
In a way, we're paying homage to them, I suppose, and hopefully when we finish doing it, somebody else will pick up the baton and run with it.
We're above the cloud. Wow, look at it up here. I love it. Woohoo! How nice is that?
The aircraft is good for another 30 years now, which will see certainly see me and Ronnie's flying careers out, and hopefully it will then be passed on to new owners, and they will see fit to carry on the legacy.
Is that the coast we can see, or is that just a cloud bank? Over there, yeah. The coast. Is it? Oh, yeah. Golf Oscar Romeo 1 frequency, we're at 2,600 feet, approaching Dover. The channel looks clear.
75 years ago, these skies were thick with Allied planes heading for enemy territory.
Have you armed the bombs? Calibrated the gun sight?
Paul and Ronnie must also look out for the other cubs.
Guys, Paul and Ronnie were just coasting out overhead the memorial south of Dover, 3,200 feet.
Roger, Plan is Lima Hotel, we are about a mile in front of you, 3,500 feet. Save at the moment, boys.
Okay, 2050, how fast we're doing, 60? Yeah, 60 knots. We're level. Yeah, pretty much. Okay, I'm happy. Can you see France? Yeah, I can, yeah. Well, there's plenty of shipping about, mate. The Voyagers can perhaps see us.
Land is now more than 10 miles away in either direction. Too far to glide to safety if the engine gives up now.
There's no shoreline, it's high tide. So if we can't make the top of the cliffs, we've had it. Right, there's a small boat down there, look, so anything goes wrong now, we'll keep an eye on that boat. Wow, this is epic, Ron. Absolutely epic. Absolutely, yeah. Leal information, Golf Bravo Romeo Oscar Romeo for basic service.
Golf Bravo Romeo Oscar Romeo, bonjour.
Visibility is getting worse.
I've lost the guy in front, but I got one. Low. 2 o'clock low. Hypercup. Or is it? Or is it a boat? No, that's not an aeroplane, is it?
But the Cub is nearing her destination.
That's Calais just there, isn't it? Yeah, I think so. That's the harbour there, look, Ram. Yeah, okay.
After 45 minutes in the air, the Cub has almost made it. And so have Paul and Ronnie's wingmen.
Calais, Golf Bravo Romeo, Oscar Romeo, turning finals, 2-4, right.
Roger, Golf Oscar Romeo, surface wind 220 degrees, 8 knots, report runway vacated.
Very nice.
Report runway.
Wasn't too bad, was it? Let's have some fresh air in. There's 2 Cubs in front. Lovely stuff. Well done, that man. Woohoo! We made it. That's the best thing I've ever done in an aeroplane. There you go. That's off, that's off, that's off, that's off. I'm getting hoot. I'm getting hoot in France, Ron.
You are, you? Good man.
En français.
Ah.
Québec, visuel sur les 3 en arrière, on s'intègre derrière.
In the region that was the scene of the bloody battle for Europe following D-Day, a flock of cubs is returning. Ronnie and Paul are arriving in the middle of the biggest wartime anniversary France has seen in years. 300 warbirds are congregating.
I suppose after what we've done, it's a bit of a relief getting here in one piece. Obviously, we've got to get home again. But really looking forward to what's going on here, meeting all the new guys from all over Europe and Scandinavia, really. And I think there's a few Yanks joining in as well, so it'll be nice to catch up. Nice to give Ronnie a bit of an outing.
Paul and Ronnie have joined aviators from all over Europe to celebrate the part played by one of the smallest warbirds in one of the war's greatest operations. Some of the pilots are experts on the L-bird's past.
As a historian, it's a privilege to actually visit the sites where these aircraft operated in military conditions. You know, this is the underdog. People have described this, it's the little plane that went to war. And it is, you know, this aircraft was as important to the war as a B-17 or a P-51 Mustang.
Thousands of people have flocked to Normandy to celebrate the liberation of France and pay their respects to those who made the ultimate sacrifice. Only a few hundred pilots who flew in the days that followed the invasion are still alive, and only a handful are fit to attend the 75th anniversary. Jim Kunkel is one of them.
Every time we took off, we saw what was going on that beachhead. So, you know, it was just magnificent. When you flew along the line and you see the British and the Canadians and the Americans, it's unbelievable. I don't think I played a very big role. I was just one of a million great guys. And I have strong feelings. I think the D-Day belongs to the ground forces.
But the weather, which delayed D-Day itself in 1944, is once again at work.
The weather is not going to be very good, and it's going even to be very, very bad.
The storm Eleanor is coming, okay? It will impact the area tomorrow at midday. The expected wind at midday is 40 knots up to 50.
For light planes covered in fabric and few hangars to house them, it's a devastating outlook.
We were hoping to do a flight over the beaches tomorrow, big mass thing, with as many aircraft as possible. But it looks as though that's gone by the board now.
Paul doesn't like the sound of the forecast, and he's made a difficult decision.
We're bugging out. The briefing there, the weather forecast, 50 knots. You're not tying these planes down into grass at 50 knots. They're going to take off on their own. So immediately after this briefing, we're out.
We need to be gone, do we?
We do. Yeah. In a hurry.
After years of planning and 3 days in the air to get here, it's terrible news. But the Cub has once again helped to make history. And by running for home, she'll survive to fly another day.
Right, fuel is on.
There's an immense amount of satisfaction in knowing that we played our part in getting them to a fantastic event in history. We're all very grateful for the sacrifices that those people made.
It may well be Ronnie's swan song of his flying career. So we're both really happy. Obviously the guys back then would probably laugh at us now. But we'll be back to commemorate what they did another day.
The Cub is homeward bound, finally recognised for what she is, a war hero no longer in disguise.